Well, it worked out pretty awesome to get this next guest on the show. I was randomly on Facebook the other day, and I look and I see this guy is in Alberta at the Calgary Stampede Ranch and traveling around, and I'm like, I gotta give him a message and see what he's up to. And it just happens that he's heading by, going to Montana the next day, so we get things lined up. But he's been an announcer in the PRCA since 1988. Now a gold card member, selected as the Wrangler NFR alternate announcer in 1995. He was selected to work the Ram National Circuit Finals Rodeo on 4 separate occasions and worked 4 different PRCA Circuit Finals for a total of 18 appearances. He's announced the College National Finals Rodeo 8 times, the National High School Rodeo Finals twice, the Indian National Finals twice, but the majority of his career was spent with the professional bull riders from 1994 to 2008. He was selected to work the PBR World Finals 8 times and spent 15 years as the ABBI World Finals announcer. Also working RFD-TV's The American for 9 years from 2014 to 2022. Having worked over 100 different PRCA rodeos in 30 different states and 80 different PBR events in 25 different states, as well as Canada. He and his wife Amber now own and operate Silver Creek Rodeo Company. From Stephenville, Texas, please welcome to the show, Randy Schmutz.
Wow, that's kind of crazy. Well,
there's a lot of
stuff
stuff
there.
To
do that in 2 parts. Isn't it crazy that I looked today before we came here, and 1,907 miles away from home.
1907. 1907. That's the number.
And those
right?
aren't kilometers.
That's miles. 1,907 miles to Stephenville. So that, I remember being driving. We drove to Phoenix last winter, and it was probably 24 hours, I think, because it's about 18 to Vegas.
Yeah, but you're young. You can do that straight through. I cannot.
Dang near.
Yeah,
not quite.
Yeah.
But so tell me this though: how did this trip come about, and how did all these stops come about? Because were you at Thurston? No, you were in Strathmore last night.
Yeah.
But you were at Thurston's a couple days ago. Tell me the story. How did this all happen?
It kind of sounds crazy, but Canada and buck and horse breeding, and actually the rodeo world up here is kind of like a Disneyland for a guy like me who's had the opportunity to travel all over the country and be a part of some of the greatest rodeos on the planet. And now kind of stock contracting, my wife and I have gotten into the buck and horse breeding kind of industry, and we're absolutely green as a gourd and novice and this, that, and other. And we've just always respected several breeders up here, and kind of had an idea, man, it'd be great to come to the Calgary Stampede Ranch and kind of see what's going on up here. And we took advantage of some contacts and reached out to Tyler Kraft, and only expected the greatest hospitality and got more than we even expected. And he said, yeah, come on out. And in fact, he and the Calgary Stampede horses were over in Puyallup, Washington this past week, and he told me still come, and we came, and his hands, Travis Erickson and Charlie McKinnon, showed us around, and we spent a few days there, and then we took advantage of that. And my wife has known Linda Thurston almost her entire adult life. I've worked with Skeeter. For 25 years, I worked with Skeeter at Wolf Point, Montana. He was the scoreboard operator, and I was the announcer, and so we had a relationship with her in Big Valley. And just as rodeo friends do, we give them a call, and good grief, we didn't even want to leave. We spent 2 days there, and also got a chance to go down and visit with the Bruin family and Darcy Hollingsworth, and saw the Legends Rodeo stock outfit. And we have been, Disneyland doesn't even describe what we've been going through the last few days.
I haven't been to the ranch for a while now, but I remember going, it was 2013. Scott Way was a bullfighter. For a long time here, worked in Canadian Finals a number of years, Calgary Stampede, and worked for the ranch. Grew up in, I want to say, Delia, but I went to go to a bull riding with him, a PBR show one night that was up in Nipawin, Saskatchewan, it's probably 8 or 10 hours from here to get there from Calgary. Mm-hmm. So I went and met Scott on Friday at some point. I think the show must have been on Saturday, or maybe it was a Thursday or whatever. But we go out there. And he's like, yeah, we just got I think he told me we had some light ranching to do first. So we had to do a couple things at the ranch. And, I don't know anything about ranching. You've seen the house here. I live in town. Have always been around horses and have ridden since I was a kid, but don't have horses right now. Something I'd like to do again someday. But we go out there, and I forget the bronc rider's name right now. I don't know if Devin, if you remember who it might be. One of the guys that worked at the ranch. It wasn't Charlie or Tyler, but it's a bronc rider, a shorter guy from out that way. But first thing we do we go out there and they go and find me one of the ranch horses, like the same ones they use during the summertime for the rodeo for all the ranch girls when they're doing the flags and whatnot. And this guy's name is escaping me, but he's a bronc rider, and like a super nice guy. Like I knew he was really cowboy, but he made a halter out of a like a head rope, like a rope.
Yeah.
He just made a halter out of a rope, like in like one swing made a halter, and just hands me the rope and says, "Here, this one's yours." So and then we go and the saddle I ended up using was like a Canadian champion stock contractor of the year saddle that they throw on this horse for me, and we go and ride and gather all the mares up for something. I don't even know what they were doing. If they were, I don't know what we were doing, but we just had to like bring them all in, and then we loaded the bulls and went to the event, and we had like all the best Stampede bulls on the trail that day. It was one of the most epic days of that year.
It's a little tough to do just light ranch work on a ranch that's 22,000 acres. So, yeah, it was. I'm sure we'll get into some stories about the experience over there. But as a fan of rodeo and a fan of, I was a bull rider, and I raised bulls with my wife and I for 15 years, and we're quite successful at it. But the horse thing to me has been the most intriguing and most fascinating because it's the cornerstone of our sport. I mean, the PRCA emblem is a bucking horse, and I could go on and on about that. But, man, the experiences that we enjoyed at the Calgary Stampede Ranch was just unbelievable.
Well, we better talk about that right now.
Okay.
Talk about some of the highlights.
Sure.
And is it the buck and shoot setup that they have up on the hill where they buck the young ones, or is it the processing facility where they can do all the work on them, or like?
It's all of that because you can't do what they do at their level without all the pieces, and all the pieces were there.
And then some. Probably.
Yeah, and number one, I'll brag on them. Aesthetically, the place was sharp, painted up, immaculate.
Yeah.
And then they're dealing in such numbers that they're breeding anywhere from 50 to 60 mares a year, foaling 45 to 50 colts a year. And when you multiply that just in a 3-year basis, you'd have 150 yearlings, 2-year-olds, and 3-year-olds, and you could process them, in a one-day period. They have the setup to do it with. They have the working area. They have the lead-up chutes. Everything's hydraulic. They have a very unique chute, working chute that tilts, and they can.
For the feet, right?
Yeah, they can trim, they can castrate, they can brand, and they can do it without hurting the animals. But probably shouldn't disclose all the secrets that we learned, but I will share this, that they spend the time to halter break their weanlings, to handle and get them around horses early on, and that I think transcends into handling them horses. We had a really close friend of ours, Thomas Mitchell, who's been raising bucking horses down in Arkansas for 35 years. He's had a half a dozen horses go to the NFR and his breeding program. He was with us, and he keeps using the term, the Calgary Stampede horses that you see on television are housebroke. They're easy to handle. They've got their quirks, and they're broncs. But for the most part, you can see that they've been brought through a system that acclimated them into being superstar talents when they were called on to do their job. So the arena was there. They talked about, bucking these colts with a dummy, bucking them with riders. The processing, and I'm saying processing instead of processing because I've been in Canada for 5 days, but the processing facility, the lead-ups, the chutes, the building that they keep all their equipment in, and then the pens, just the holding pens. And the great news for them is they don't have to confine horses a lot because they've got a lot of ground to run those horses on. But when they have to, they've got the physical plant to do what they do at the absolute highest level. It would be me comparing going to the Dallas Cowboys training camp instead of going to my high school football practice.
Okay.
It's unbelievable.
But so as a stock contractor yourself now, you talk about going here and seeing the legends set up. And going to the Calgary Stampede Ranch, but this is the business you guys are in too, and to see that set up and see the ranch, and like that was Winston Bruce's vision in 1965. Mm-hmm. So it's been 59 years.
Well, we did the math, 1961 to now.
61, okay.
63 years.
63.
Yeah, so 63 years of refinement makes for a lot better, more positive result.
Well, and you guys, I'm looking at the numbers here. 1993 started XS Ranch Bucking Bulls. Did that until 2010.
Mhm.
Then 2018, though, you got XS Ranch Bucking Bulls. But then you guys buy Silver Creek in 2018 as well. So,
Mhm.
like, you've got 6 years.
Yeah.
You're just finishing.
Yeah.
You're finishing your 7th season
Yeah.
essentially.
Well, the good news for us is it's been a coffee shop conversation. How did a PRCA rodeo announcer get into and make the transition to stock contractor? You said it there. We've been raising bulls and contracting those in 1993, and we've been around event production for a long time. So when we weren't on the road behind the microphone, we were at home raising bulls and putting on events. And my wife has been the most supportive woman on the planet when it comes to me doing these crazy things. She supported them 100%. And we've been talking about becoming a professional rodeo stock contractor for 25 years. And we finally pulled the trigger in 2018. But we were, I'm going to say it, we were equipped. We were ready. We lacked a lot of the physical experience you see on the big firms today. But I also brought a whole nother perspective to the stock contracting part of what we do now because of my perception from the announcer stand for 38 years. I got to see the most positive, high-level production on the planet, and I got to be a part of some of the worst events you could possibly think of.
Yeah.
And you learn more about being a part of the worst ones than you do being a part of the best ones. But we've really excelled in that we try to do things for everybody, every part of the contest, from the timed events to the rough stock. And then the production part of it is we are in the entertainment business. We have to produce an event, and so
And a show.
That's kind of how we got here.
I wonder where to go from here. I think that there's. Well, let's talk about the production side of things quick. So I didn't realize that you produced the. What do we got here? Wrote and created announcer scripts, directed and co-produced the opening ceremonies at the 95-96 NFR, so 20 performances worth. You were the alternate announcers. Was that part of the duties at the time?
Mm-mm.
No, that you did
No,
that.
That was in addition.
Oh, really?
In fact,
I don't have my media guide with me, but I'm assuming that it would be Bob and maybe Randy that would
those
announce
2
them?
years I was there, I think Bob and Randy were there 1 year, and I think Bob and Boyd were there the other year.
Okay, yeah.
And so that was probably the most unique experience and opportunity in my 38 years, and probably really kind of funny, the least talked about up and until the last few years, because it was just a part of what we did. But if you think about, I'll share with you how that came about. Prior to 1995, when I did that, in those years, they were doing what we called skit openings at the NFR. And Cotton Rosser was known for a lot of the great things he did there. And they brought several big props and did elaborate, things on the arena floor, chuck wagon catching on fire and, racing around the arena. And
Really?
all kinds of really
Like
unique.
a Vegas show.
Like a Vegas show.
Oh, wow.
And it was really unique. And I don't know how many times they put that out for bids, but in 1995 they put it out for bid, and the Sutton Rodeo Company from South Dakota was awarded the bid. And I was working almost full-time for Jim Sutton and doing his big rodeos in Rapid City. And in Rapid City, we're in a building, and we're doing those skit-type openings. And he's relying on me to pull it all together and, come up with the verbiage and what do we do here and what gate do we come in. We literally, in Rapid City, we created a campfire scene. I got to tell you a funny story. We created a campfire scene. Well, in my naive inability to understand all these things that you do or don't do, I thought, well, in order to have a campfire, you got to have wood and you got to have some type of an accelerant. So rather than use gasoline, we used kerosene. And I was
Fire wouldn't want to go out.
Yeah, I was instructed to do that. So I thought, well, I better soak these little logs that we had, this little firewood. I better soak it in this kerosene. So we put 3 or 4 sticks of firewood in a 5-gallon bucket of kerosene.
Oh, my God. You created a bomb, didn't you? Oh, no.
So the fire worked really, really good. And it was very, very, very professional looking. But we couldn't put it out.
Oh, no. So you couldn't pick it up even to take it out of
Yeah,
there.
well, we ended up, I did have one thing correct. I had a soaking wet hotel bath towel. And so we ended up having to pick up the logs with the towel wrapped up and take them out behind the building. And when you take the towel off the logs, the air got back to it and they
Back on fire.
ignited again. Anyway,
Holy
so
smokes.
fast forward to the NFR. So he was awarded the openings, and he called me and he said, hey, we want you involved in this group. We have a host of players, contract personnel, ideas, but we're going to need you to help us. We want you to write the scripts and help us co-produce these openings. And I agreed. And so it was only about 2 weeks later I get the call from the PRCA that I've been selected as the alternate announcer. And so Jim calls Sean Davis and says, hey, we've got Schmutz on our crew. You know we're coming to do the openings. Is that going to be an issue with him being the alternate? He said, absolutely not. It'll be perfect. And so I began constructing the scripts and the ideas, and Sean actually worked together with me, and I had to send him all these scripts, what we were doing, what gates we were coming in, what personnel we were using, how we were exiting, the actual layout.
And the timeline, too.
And the timeline. And in fact, we moved from an office in town in Stephenville to our home and work remotely from our home now, and we found an envelope. My wife keeps phenomenal records. And we found the envelope with the scripts from those 20 performances, which then were just on typewritten paper.
Oh,
we
wow.
we were just kind of getting into the email era at that time. And so we're actually going to take and frame some of those more elaborate openings. But, man, we take up the rest of the day talking about how fun that was. I worked with Chris Ledoux. We had the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders come out for one opening.
Holy smokes.
We did a Mexican poker with 6 of the most unbelievably decorated bullfighters sitting at a table in the center of the arena, all in tuxedos, under spotlight, and a big brindle ball-faced crossbred bull that should have killed them all and would run to the table and snort and blow snot on the back of the necks of these bullfighters, but never ran through the table.
No way. Were you expecting him to run through the table?
Well, they were.
The
And
bullfighters
we
were.
didn't want him to. But
Yeah.
he was capable of it because we had put him in an arena prior to that, and he was capable of it.
Holy.
I think what saved their life, it was in a dark house, and the spotlights helped. But I have a phenomenal picture of that opening, and it's one of the best pictures.
Wow.
Yeah, so anyway, yeah, that experience, I did that for 1995, and then in 1996, expecting to get the NFR as the announcer.
Yeah.
Didn't happen, but that's okay. But Jim got the contract again. So I was there. So I did, wrote the scripts, helped, co-produced, directed 20 performances of openings at the NFR.
Oh, wow. What was the most memorable opening then?
I'd have to go back and look at the list of what we did, but one of the unique things was in 1996, that was celebrating Chris Ledoux's 20th anniversary of his world title. And in 1996, Chris had become a bombshell country music artist.
That was your with the was that one when he released a song with Garth?
I think he had done that a
later
couple of years before. He had
Okay.
become a bigger, better known star.
More mainstream.
Mainstream. We all knew him. We
Yeah.
loved his work.
Yeah.
But because he was mainstream and really on top of his game musically, and it was the 20th anniversary, we brought him in and we did a real simple opening, and it was a kind of a pantomime or a lip sync type deal, but we wanted to do something that kind of mirrored his performances on stage. And he did lots of pyro, and he'd jump off a platform, he'd get on a bucket machine during his music performance and stuff like that. And so we contacted him. I got to talk to him directly on the phone prior to his arrival, and we put a little small platform on top of the roping chute at the end of the Thomas and Mack, and pyro and gerbs all around that platform. And we played his, I don't remember what it was, Hooked on an 8-Second Ride, or I don't remember what the song was, but spotlight hit him and the pyro went off, and he jumped off the top of that dadgum rope and chute, and it's 5.5 feet off the ground and lands on his feet. And then, of course, lip syncs about one verse of the song, and he had a ball. But he had more fun just being at the NFR and behind the chutes. And I have a picture of him and I down there in the moat area where they do the interviews.
Yeah.
And we treated him like a star, but he wanted to be treated like a cowboy. And I said to him, we've got security that's going to take you to your suite And that's all right. I'm good. And then I said, and then afterwards, we have a limo arranged for you, and your wife was there to take you back to your hotel. Nope, I'm good. We're gonna grab a cab. And so the rodeo's going on, the bareback riding's going on. So the halls around the Thomas and Mack were pretty empty, and him and I are walking right down the middle of the hall in the Thomas and Mack to his suite.
the
The
concourse.
mezzanine, the concourse.
Yeah.
And so, really cool experience for me. So,
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
But that would be one of the more unique ones. Probably the most unique one was the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders.
What did they do?
They did a sideline routine on the arena floor in the Thomas and Mack.
Really?
Yeah, they did a sideline routine. They are like little soldiers. They are handled by a manager. It's yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Don't speak unless spoken to. It was kind of a weird deal, but they were up in a dressing room in the Thomas and Mack, and I went up there a few minutes before they had to come down to check on them, and I walk in the door, and it's almost like somebody said something, attention, or girls, or someone's here, or something, and they all stood up from where they were sitting, almost like they were at attention. So it was a very professional group, and they did a really good job. So, yeah.
Well, so we've got to go back a little bit here, Randy. I've got to ask about. So we got a little more info here. There was a opening in those 2 years that you were a part of. You got to tell us about.
Didn't forget about it. Just thought, I'm a little too humble. I'm not going to talk about that. But I was picking guitar and singing and kind of piddling around, and I'd written some rodeo songs. And Jim asked me, he said, "What do you got that you think we can turn an opening into?" And it was a cool song. It was kind of that, "Hey Mom, I'm on the road. I'm in Denver. I'm headed to Fort Worth, and then I got a good one at San Antonio." And so we actually literally, I performed the song with a great friend of mine, Kyle Evans from South Dakota. He accompanied me and played guitar, and I'm in the center of the arena under a spotlight with Kyle, and we enacted this little boy riding a Shetland pony and learning how to ride broncs, and becoming a part of the NFR. And so I was able to actually perform the song that I wrote and then enact that on the arena floor. It was a cool deal. And my wife, when I met her, she was manufacturing coats and jackets and custom Pendleton leather, buckskin, elk hide, really unique creations. And she built me one for that opening. And it was pretty cool to have a little bit of the family in that, plus a little bit of our artistic talent, I guess. So.
How nervous were you to do that part?
Unbelievably nervous because it was done live. It wasn't lip synced. So it was pretty cool though. We practiced the skit and we practiced the singing, and the neat thing about it is I'd been performing as an announcer, and I'm nervous at every event I go to. If you're not nervous, then you're not feeling it. But
don't care. I've heard that before, and I think I agree.
Yeah. So, but it was really cool. But those openings and that time and those 20 performances to be a part of the legendary NFR was a pretty cool part of our history.
I want to. We kind of were on the way to it a little earlier, but getting into announcing originally, 1987. The story is first rodeo announcing experience in 1987, but you were working for, did you say Smith, Harper Morgan?
Harper Morgan at the time.
Harper Morgan, before Stace.
Harper Morgan, before Stace. This would have been 1987.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a unique deal. Every announcer, I think, has some unique quirk as to how they got into it. I'm sure there's some guys, and I'm sure I know them, that ultimately had one goal, and that was to become a rodeo announcer. But me, in my high school days, I wanted to do one thing. I wanted to be a radio disc jockey. And I was singing in high school too, and so I had a little bit of a performance bug. But I just love listening to disc jockeys. I love listening to broadcasters and football and sports. But I just want to be a disc jockey because I love music. I could be a guy on the radio talking about my favorite artist and whatever. And so I went to college for 2 years, didn't graduate, but I had was going to study communications.
And you're bull riding too at this time.
I was riding bulls at the time.
Where'd you go to school at?
Stephen F. Austin State University in East Texas, little town in Nacogdoches, Texas, oldest town in Texas.
Yeah.
And so I just was riding bulls and knew several people in the rodeo game and got invited to be a part of the labor crew for Harper and Morgan, and I was taking care of the saddle horses. They had 10 black and white paint horses that needed washed almost every other day. And I got to saddle and tack them out for the flag girls and fed and took care of them. But on the way, I also got to enter the bull riding rodeos as a permit holder. And when I didn't get drawn in, I got to get on turnout bulls, and I thought I was in hog heaven. So I'm getting paid. I'm a part of a carnival circus ride, going from rodeo to rodeo and taking care of these horses and being a part of this deal. And at Baton Rouge, Louisiana, we were all sitting around after the rodeo, drinking a little beverage, and I was picking guitar and singing. And James Harper walked up to the group there and said, "My gosh, Randy, I didn't know you sang." Oh, well, yeah, I tried to. And he said, "Well, by God," he said, "can you sing the national anthem?" And I said, "Well, I've never done it publicly, but sure." He said, "Well, next weekend, Monroe, Louisiana, you're it. We'll have you sing the national anthem." So that first performance prior to the rodeo, I asked if I could at least go do a little rehearsal on the mic, sound check, and I did. And the first night, Phil Gardenhire, the late, great NFR, beautiful, unbelievable voice, Phil Gardenhire was James's full-time announcer. And that first night, he did pretty much a straight intro. "Here, ladies and gentlemen, our national anthem, Randy Schmutz." Did the national anthem. It was in a building, reverb. It was great. We got along good. I had a little issue here and there, but the second night, he was even better. By Saturday night, Phil Gardenhire, "Ladies and gentlemen, we are happy to say the Harper Morgan Rodeo Company is proud to bring direct from Nashville, Tennessee, having just recorded his first album, Songs of the Saddle Boss Man, with our national anthem. Here's Randy Schmutz." None of that was true. I hadn't
made it up.
I hadn't been to Nashville. I hadn't been anywhere. And so,
But it's Saturday. You got to.
But it was Saturday, and it was pretty cool. So a couple of I did that for the next 3 or 4 rodeos, and a couple of rodeos later, Phil came to me one morning after chores, and it was a lazy day, and he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Nothing." He said, "Saddle my horse and grab one from Harper, and let's go take a ride." They had a big, huge grass parking lot. It was in Montgomery, Alabama, and we're riding
in the
along.
winter, like in
It was
February?
in March.
In March.
In
okay.
March. And so we're riding along there, and, "Son, what are you going to do with the rest of your life?" I said, "Heck, I don't know." "What do you mean?" "Well, what do you got picked out to do for a living?" I said, "Well, I want to be a radio disc jockey." "Ever thought about announcing rodeos?" I said, "No, sir." "Well, you ought to give it a thought." So we had a nice visit. Well, they had a spring run that had a big break after April. So I left there from Harper Morgan, South Louisiana, went back to East Texas to my hometown of 5,000 people, and cold turkey walked in the radio station and asked for a job, and they gave me one.
Wow.
And so it was an AM station, and it was a pretty widespread station there in 3 counties. And I took to that and just had a ball and became a disc jockey. And like a lot of rodeos, I was invited as an on-air personality to come out to the rodeo and do a few little rodeo mentions, introduce the queens, and introduce the rodeo announcer. And it was a PRCA rodeo, so I couldn't announce it. I didn't have a card. And the stock contractor there was Errol Klein from Louisiana. Mike Mathis was the announcer. And we got done. I got on my bull Saturday night. I was entered. I got bucked off, mucked out, and the stock contractor knew me. He walked over and said, "Schmutz," said, "I didn't know you were a rodeo announcer." I said, "I'm not." I said, "I'm a radio disc jockey that rides bulls." He said, "Well, you ought to be a announcer that quits riding bulls." And so he said, "I got a rodeo in a couple of weeks. You want to come announce it for me?" And I said, "What, high school rodeo? What is it?" He said, "Oh, no, it's a really big amateur rodeo in Liberty, Mississippi." I said, "Errol, I've never announced a rodeo in my life." "Ah, hell, you'll be good." He hired me, green as green could be, and I had to put together a sound system. I had to put together some cassette tapes with some rodeo music on it.
Oh, wow.
And I went down there as if I were doing it my whole life and did a pretty decent job, but it bit me like a big bug, and I just thought, man, this is it.
And you probably made $200 for the
Probably
weekend.
made 200, probably lost money.
Yeah.
It was a long ways from Texas to Mississippi. The further I drove east into Mississippi, the closer the trees got to the highway.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
anyway, that was the beginning. And in 1988, I was fortunate enough to apply for my announcer's card. And Don Inslee and Phil Gardenhire signed for my card. I had some help along the way. And then in 1988, I was a full member. In 1989, I made a phone call to Jim Sutton. They hired me on the spot and took me to South Dakota. and that launched a huge career.
Wow.
And in 1990, only a year later, Jim asked if I'd do the circuit finals in the Badlands in South Dakota, North Dakota. I did that 4 years in a row, and from that it was a unbelievable whirlwind for me, just crazy. So
Wow. Well, where do you want to go to now? Do you want to go through some of the PRCA years, or do you want to go to like the National High School Finals, or talk about the INFR or the PBR side of things? Like, what's next?
we can talk. Let's talk about the circuit finals and a few things I did along the way.
Okay, but
So-
before we go any further, though, I got to ask about Jim Sutton. And Flint told me that Jim was the one that got him doing his show for the first time ever in Rapid City. Is that correct?
I was a part of that.
Yeah, I wanted to say there had to be some connection.
I was the Ed McMahon. You know who Ed
I
McMahon
know, that's
is?
before my time. Sorry. Is he the sidekick guy
Yep.
that like
Yep.
what Kurt Blake does
Yep,
now?
Johnny Carson. Yeah,
Okay.
it would be what Kurt Blake does for him now.
Yeah.
So
Oh wow.
Flint and I was announcing, and Flint was the barrel man at Rapid City.
Ah, and what year was this?
Oh, good grief!
Is this early '90s? I'm assuming.
It would have been early '90s. I don't remember exactly the year.
You would be circuit finals, like Badlands Circuit
Yep.
Finals, 1990 to 94.
Yeah, it would have been that 94, 95, somewhere in there. I'm pretty sure it would have been prior to Flint's taking his full-time position with the PBR.
Which
So
was 99.
yeah,
So
so
right,
it would
because
have been.
Cliff did the finals in '98, right?
Yep,
Like Brinson's dad.
yep, absolutely. So Jim was an innovator. Jim was the one who launched the Wrangler bullfights
Oh,
30
no
years
way.
ago, and
Holy.
Jim did several other great innovative things.
Holy.
And they had a theater in the Civic Center
Yeah.
location at Rapid City, and he's always thinking, how can I utilize this whole platform? And we're there for 10 days, and we only rodeo the first weekend and the second weekend, and we have a big
Gap in between.
we had a big ag banquet. They called it the Ranchman's Boot Ball, and several things during the week, and which now they do some ex Broncs and some ex Bulls and all that kind of stuff now. Well, he figured out to fill a hole. He said, "Hey Flint, how about you? You could be Johnny Carson. Randy could be Ed McMahon. You guys could interview these cowboys and these celebrities from the Badlands and the Billy Bowers and this would be cool." And of course, Flint just said, "Absolutely, no hesitation." And I knew immediately when we did that, he was going to be the Flint we know now, with the Outside the Barrel show that you see at the NFR.
Is that what you guys called it then too?
No, I don't remember. You'd have to ask Flint that. My memory's not that good, but I've said to Flint all along that I'm really surprised, to be honest with you. He told me the other day he hadn't really pursued anything like that on a higher level once he decided to hang up the baggies and the grease paint. I thought he would be that guy, somewhere, somehow, whatever. But I love his podcast. I love his Live with Flint or whatever. But that was the launch of what became the Outside the Barrel show.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember there was a story I had to ask you about
Mm-hmm.
that.
Yeah. So, but early on with Jim Sutton, had a lot of great opportunities. As I shared with you, he was instrumental in getting me in the Badlands Circuit Finals. I was there for 4 years, moved over to the Great Lakes Circuit Finals. But during that same time, in 1995, the Dodge National Circuit Finals, which later became the Ram National Circuit Finals, Pocatello, Idaho, Holt Arena, man, it was second to the NFR. When they
It was a big deal for a long time.
When they created that National Circuit Finals situation where the champion from each circuit in every event and the average champion from each circuit in every event got to come and compete, it was a cool deal. And so if you were announcing you wanted to do a circuit finals or you wanted to go on to the Dodge National Circuit Finals and ultimately you wanted to be at the NFR. And so in 1995, I got the nod to do that. You want to hear a really funny story?
I want to hear all the funny stories.
I got the nod to do it in 1994, but I was a bit of a rule breaker, and they took it away from me.
Oh, no way.
So,
Wait, so they gave it to you and then they took it back?
well, let me rephrase that.
Uh-oh.
I was in line to get it,
Oh.
and then was taken out of eligibility because I broke a rule. In our system, and I don't have an issue with the rule, but you can only work one circuit finals in all contract personnel positions. If you're selected to announce the Badlands and you agree to do so, you cannot go on to announce the Great Lakes Circuit Finals. And so, but in my mind at the time, my contestant mentality said, well, if I break a rule, I'll get fined. So I was doing the Badlands Circuit Finals in 1993, and had been there 4 years. That was the fourth year. And the Great Lakes Circuit Finals called me early that fall and said, we'd like for you to come do our circuit finals. And I said, well, I can't. I've got the Badlands. Well, we understand that. We understand there's a rule you can't do two, but if you're willing to come do ours, we'll pay your fine. And I thought, well, heck, I get to
Why
do
not?
two. So we just thought it was legit.
Where was the Great Lakes Circuit
Louisville,
Finals?
Kentucky.
Oh,
It has been since the inception. It's one of the biggest and best circuit finals on the planet.
Wow.
So we went through
How much IPRA crew would be there?
a lot of influence over there, but it's PRCA. The Great Lakes Circuit Finals has the most states in it as any other circuit. And then they're a vaster, wider, broad, but they have a Freedom Hall seats almost 14,000
Holy smokes.
people, and they sell it out today, almost 3 performances.
Holy smokes.
So anyway, so I accepted their invitation. And
Turns out it was not a fine.
No, yeah, it wasn't a fine. It was a bigger slap on the wrist. But
Oh, geez.
so I go, and we get stipends from several sponsors for circuit finals appearances, from Ram and from Wrangler and all this, that, and other. And I learned a week after. So I go to the Badlands in October, and I go to the Great Lakes in November. And about a week after the Great Lakes, I learned that my stipend money was not going to be awarded. They kept it.
They being the PRCA?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Yeah, they kept it. And then I got informed that your application as a Dodge National Circuit Finals candidate is going to be rescinded. You're not eligible because I broke the rules.
Oh.
And so I said, okay, whatever. So anyway, and there was a lot of chatter. I mean, it was kind of, I had been to the Badlands for 4 years, and it was a pretty good shot that I was going to get to go to Pocatello in '94. So I cleaned up my act and only did one circuit finals after that. And so I ended up with the blessing from Jim. The Great Lakes invited me to stay. And so I did the Great Lakes Circuit Finals for 12 consecutive years. And so I go through the process again, and I get the nod to go to the DNCFR in 1995. And in fact, the buckle I'm wearing today is the DNCFR buckle.
From then?
Yes, sir.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've worn a couple others briefly, but I don't know why it's been the one that I've worn it for 30 years now.
Oh, wow.
So,
well, and so does that one, it doesn't have the NFR logo in the middle. It has the RNCFR logo. Or the DNCFR?
No.
What's in the middle of it? I don't know.
The great thing about it is it's got the NFR shield in it, and
Really?
it's got DNCFR on it.
But the NFR shield.
Yes.
Yeah, because I saw it earlier and I was like, because Dennis Halstead from up here worked that
They
finals
changed
a
the
ton
logo a couple years later, and so I've got 4 of them buckles, and I think all 4 of them are different. But
okay. But I always remember Dennis going to work that finals.
Yep.
Denny Halstead.
Yep.
He would have been there a little later though.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot later. I did it, and I did it in '95 and '96 consecutively, and I think I skipped a year in '97, and I think I did it again '98, '99.
Okay.
We were
trying Flint probably.
He was there 1 year. I got to announce it, co-announce it with Randy Corley, John Shipley, Doug Mathis, and Boyd Polhamus. So I got to go 4 years. And
Probably worked with Liesel once.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
So back to the DNCFR. So I go there in '95, have a ball. It was outstanding. It was everything I could think it would ever be. And so that was the spring of 1995. And in the fall of 1995, I get the call from Jim to do the openings. A week later, I get to call the PRCA. I've got the NFR alternates position. Man, I'm flying higher than I'm supposed to be flying. I'm just like, this is great. And this is only 6 years in. And so we were real excited, and we went to the NFR, and we did the openings, and I was the alternate. Here's a funny story for you. At the NFR, during those 10 days, the alternates position is in the event, one of the two selected to announce, have trouble, go down, voice issues, something happens, unavailable. We have a third guy as a backup. And you're there in all the meetings. You do everything there is to do except get behind the microphone.
Do you get paid similar to those guys?
Similar, yes, not as much, but we get a buckle. No, we got a jacket. Didn't get a buckle. We got a jacket, but
so you actually have a pretty good deal because you don't actually have to work. You don't have to announce.
Yeah.
You get paid
So
a bit.
kind of funny, the first 3 or 4 days after every performance, we're doing the rehearsals. So I'm up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning and then get home. And I literally didn't do any real research on the rounds and who was doing what and where the races were. But about Monday or Tuesday, 4 or 5 perfs in, I decided to go to the secretary and get all the stats and this, that, and other. I did a little brush up on, the rounds and who was winning what and who's winning the average and how many guys have rode, all their horses. That afternoon at the production meeting, we have a production meeting. I can't remember what time. It's a couple hours before the perf. Maybe it's about an hour and a half. It's in a big office in the Thomas and Mack, right there on site, and it's one of them deals where Sean Davis ran a very, 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 very tight ship, and if you weren't
for like
late,
30 years,
you were. If you were on time, you were late. If you were early, you were on time.
And how many minutes early?
Oh, you needed to be in your seat 10, 15 minutes before it started, maybe even 30. I was there probably an hour before every production meeting. But we're all sitting around and everybody's in their seat except for Bob Tallman.
Uh-oh.
And so we're thinking, he must be doing an interview. He probably got some exception because he's been the king.
He's Bob, yeah.
He's Bob, and that's okay. And so Sean Davis walks in there's a curtain separating the boardroom from his office. He walks through the curtain, sits at the head of the table, and looks right at me, and he says, "Are you ready to go?" I said, "Are we going somewhere?" He said, "Nope. Are you ready to announce the event tonight?" I said, "Yes, sir." I almost peed my pants.
Oh, wow.
And so he said, "Tallman's been involved in an auto accident.
Oh, shit.
He's fine. It's a fender bender. But he's being detained, and we don't know if he's going to be here
Wait,
to start."
being detained or was he at the hospital?
No, it didn't hurt him. They just, through the process of working through the accident scene, they didn't know if he was going to get there on time.
Holy smokes.
So can you imagine? Here I am, 5 perfs in, kind of loosely taking care of business.
Luckily, you did your homework.
Yeah, the night before. So anyway, we dismissed the meeting, and I go down to the announcer stand, and I made the decision not to set up kind of, in that lectern behind that microphone.
Yeah.
I had all my stuff and everything, and I was looking through some things, and I knew the opening because I practiced it the night before. And so I'm thinking, okay, and I kept looking at my watch and looking at my watch. It was about 4 minutes until the fanfare before the rodeo started. Tallman walked up on the announcer stand. So he stole my opportunity away from me by showing up. So. But anyway,
Thanks a lot, Bob.
So that was a cool story. But so I'm the alternate announcer, 95, did the openings. Man, I'm on top of the world. In December at the NFR, they select next year's Dodge National Circuit Finals personnel because the rodeo's 3 months away.
In February.
It was in March.
In March, okay.
Yep. And so during the NFR week, I'm doing all these great things. Almost got to announce a perf, wrote all the openings. I'm the alternate, and I get selected to do the 96 NFR. So
As the alternate?
No, excuse me, the 96 DNCFR.
Yeah.
So two years in a row at Pocatello. Man, I remember that flying high a while ago. Shit, I'm almost orbiting now. I'm like, man, this is just exactly as we planned it. So 96 was a phenomenal year for us, and had more rodeos that year, more perfs. Everything's going the right way. Amber is pregnant with our first child, and she is due the week of Pocatello.
Oh, of course.
So we told Pocatello about all this, and they understood, and they said, well, keep us informed. And the actual chairman of the rodeo was an actual a baby doctor. He delivered babies. So Amber flew to Montana to her home of Arlee a week before this. I did a rodeo the weekend before Pocatello, flew home to Arlee on a Monday night. She went to her doctor in Missoula. They began inducement, and the next day we went to the hospital, and our first Cade was born that afternoon. And so the rodeo at Pocatello starts on Thursday. So on Wednesday morning, I get up with 2 Kodak them throwaway cameras from the drugstore, and I take 2 rolls of film of this new baby boy, Cade Randy Schmutz, and I get those things developed before I leave, and I borrow her mom and dad's car, and I drive to Pocatello and do the second.
From Montana? Or from Texas?
From Montana.
Yeah.
Amber, how far is it from Missoula to Pocatello? So it's about an 8-hour drive. So I get there the night before the first perf, and they knew I was coming, and they just everything's great. So I go down there the second year in a row, and so that was kind of a cool story. So, and then Cade wore that little 1996 belt buckle for a while.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
Well, and so he was born March 19th.
March 19th of 1996.
Yeah.
2 days before my second appearance at the DNCFR.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Pretty cool deal. So,
I would say so.
yeah, yeah.
What I got to ask a little bit about the working with clowns and then the music side of things. I kind of had a thought there in 95, 96 with the NFR. Was that like, was Benji the music guy then yet, or was it still like the band years? When did that change?
You know, gosh dang, that's a heck of a question. I think Steve Remplis was still there in 95 and 96.
What did he do?
Well, he was the trumpet player.
Holy shit, really?
Yeah. So
No
Steve,
way.
the guy who used to be in the PRCA Properties office in Colorado Springs.
Isn't he still kind of involved, or what is he doing
A little
now?
bit, but not as much as he used to be.
Okay.
And so Steve was an unbelievable trumpet player, which he
No
and my
shit.
son Cade had something in common. My son was an unbelievable trumpet
Really?
player too, but Steve and I became really close friends. I'll be honest with you. I think Steve Remplis I think it was still a live band in 95 and 96. And we'd have to ask Benji Bindley
When he took it over.
Because actually, I think he told me last year when he kind of didn't pursue that position, it would have been about 25 years. So
Holy smokes.
2023 minus 25 years, so I'm saying 98 or 99.
Yeah. I remember going to the NFR. The first time I went was 04, and he was definitely there then.
Yeah. So I got to insert Amber here since you talked to music director.
Yeah, she does
Yep.
that too.
Well, it was so crazy when we met and got together, and we met in February of 1993.
At a rodeo.
At a rodeo in Bismarck, North Dakota.
Bismarck, okay.
And then
what was her role then?
Well, she was living in Montana, and she was her company, Montana Coat Company. She was working full time, and she would manufacture these custom coats and jackets out of Pendleton wool blankets and elk hide leather. And then she'd go to a couple specific rodeos and set up a vendor booth and sell them directly to the public retail.
Probably Rapid City.
She went to Rapid City, it's Black Hill Stock Show. She did the Bismarck Agri International where we met, and she did the Valley City, North Dakota. What do they call that? Something big North Dakota winter show.
Yeah.
And so
Big egg show, probably.
And then her big deal was she went to the NFR back when it was Cashman Field when they first started doing the Cowboy Christmas that they called then.
That's a baseball or football stadium, is it not?
Yep, it was big facility there, kind of north of town. But so anyway, she was selling her coats and jackets at Bismarck, and we met through some mutual friends and hung out for 10 days there. And I thought, oh boy, this is the one. I'm in trouble now. We met in February. I asked her to marry me in May, and she did in December.
Oh wow!
Yeah, I had to drag her to the altar, kicking and screaming. But
holy smokes,
she's stuck around for 31 years. So
wow.
But we'd have to get her to interact here a bit. But I don't remember that first year in '93. I'm going to say that she didn't participate as much as a music director, and I was subject to some pretty less than qualified people at some rodeos that we were doing. And I think the next year we said, man, you ought to do this. And so we started inserting her as a total separate entity from Randy Schmutz, the announcer. So she was kind of the breakout, what you know as a music director now. There were several other husband and wife teams, but we made it strictly two separate entities, and she got a check and I got a check. And she went through, you're going to think this is hilarious. It was cassette tapes to begin with. We would record 10 seconds of ride music and then pause and count to 3, to where she would play 10 seconds and she'd go 1, 2, 3 and push pause. So the next song was queued up for the next ride.
Holy shit.
And we did these tapes for that. We had tapes for the openings. We had tapes for fanfares at the end. And she was using cassette tapes first. And then she'd have to remind me about what was the next. It was either mini discs or CDs. She had a CD player that had 5 CD turntable in the darn thing, and somehow, some way, she was able to remember what CD was where. And she's going through this process of picking songs as she's going along from CDs, and then it went from that to mini disc players, and thank goodness finally comes along the Pro Sport Sound, and it goes to a computer, and it revolutionized what we were doing. But by that time, she was being asked to do work outside of the performances she did for me, but she was so busy with me, she wasn't able to do some of those. In fact, she got invited to go to Denver, to the National Western, and a few things like that. And she was doing close to 100 performances as a music director before there was a music director category.
Holy.
So we were a pretty cool package, and I will say this, our package got me to a lot of places I probably wouldn't have got to. But at the end of the day, we got to travel from corner to corner, and we drug our kids with us from 1996 till they got into high school. So it was a family it was a family affair. So
wow.
It was pretty cool. She came from a rodeo background. Her dad was an all-around champion, bulldogger and bronc rider. Her brother Ryan Mapston was a 10-time qualifier to the NFR. He
Bronc riding.
Bronc rider.
Yeah.
Won the aggregate, was reserve world champion one year. Her brother
same time as like Rod Warren, like him.
Rod
and
Warren, Dan Mortensen, Billy Epbauer, Tom
everybody.
Reeves, Rod Hay, Denny Hay.
Like the year, like the Wolves, like that was like the greatest ever. I think so.
It was one of the greatest eras of bronc riding. You know, they say generations. I think you can separate generations by 10 years. I think every 10 years you got another generation of kids, cowboys, whatever coming along.
Yeah.
And
but like Dan and Billy won all those titles.
Think about it. Dan won
Rod
6.
Hay never won any.
Dan won 6, Billy won 5, Tom won 1. Then you could throw a few other singles in there. In that era, there were 3 or 4 guys that won 20 world titles.
Everything.
So he was going to the NFR 10 years consecutive. Her brother Gray was also a Montana Circuit champion bronc rider, outstanding bronc rider, top 20 several times.
Yeah.
So I married a girl from the rodeo circle who made me a hell of a lot more popular than I was supposed to be.
Jeez. Okay, we're talking about announcers and clowns and music and everybody working together, but I got to give you a hard time though. I was surprised that you held the microphone down here.
Well, yeah, you know,
I know it's a podcast.
Announcers, we gotta put it up there right under our nose where it's supposed to go. But anyway, I wanted him to see my face. So,
yeah, that's true. Yeah. I keep mine up here just to cover my face a little bit.
Yep, it's all good.
Okay, Randy, working with clowns, music directors, as an announcer, I just got to talk about that, like what that's looked like. Like you and Amber have worked probably thousands of perfs together over the years, but like, what's that been like going from 1987 to 2000 and what are we 24 now?
Yeah, well, I was in a part of the era where barrel men, clowns, entertainers, funny guys
were bullfighters still.
Well, some of them were, but they weren't packing wireless microphones.
Oh yeah.
I had early on. Now a lot of them were. There were a handful that were, but I was in an era where I was still, telling the joke after the clown told the joke, and there was a lot of pantomime back then too. So, and then I'll be honest with you, early on, the wireless microphone on a barrel man was a blessing and a curse. Some could handle it,
still is.
Some could not. You said that, I didn't. So, no, it was a cool time in the evolution of music because even some rodeos, for instance, Cody, Wyoming, the Cody Stampede. I was fortunate to have announced that rodeo 22 times, 22 years.
Oh wow!
In the first 3 or 4, maybe 5 years, the high school marching band from the Cody High School was our music accompaniment.
Holy smokes.
And it was good, but it was not good enough. And with the advent of canned music, here comes Amber, and I talked him into letting her be the music director. In fact, we even hung our sound system, a little bitty, teeny weeny, tiny sound system, in an arena that's almost 300 feet wide and seats 5,000 people.
Holy smokes.
We asked them if they would be willing to put cables crisscrossed where we could hang a metal suspended speaker system in an outdoor venue, and they did.
Holy.
And so we did that ourselves for about 3 or 4 years, and then talked them into buying their own sound system because they had 90 performances there with the night rodeo.
Yeah.
And they did. So I guess you're pulling some stuff out of us here that I hadn't even really thought about, but now going back 25 years ago, those were some things that really were kind of unheard of.
Stuff they're still doing now, though.
They're doing now in a bigger way.
Like I want to say Molalla, Oregon has a setup that's center hung like that.
Yep. And may have even took that from, things with Cody.
Possibly.
And then you've got the big, huge suspended line array systems now and all these other things. But we were a part of that transition. So music, sound reinforcement and music was always two different things. Mm-hmm. And then as we grew into the computer age, we also were smart enough to encourage these committees like Cody and Spanish Fork and some of those bigger venues we worked at to hire a third-party sound technician, sound company, sound reinforcement, not music,
audio,
speakers, audio. And so we were instrumental in improving the production platform at rodeos we were working, because we knew they could be bigger and better if they brought better sound, a separate sound engineer, a tech who could fix things when it broke, and then have Amber doing her thing and me doing mine, and it was a pretty big deal.
Wow. And we could talk about working with entertainers, but I feel like that would maybe be externalizing some stuff right now where we got way too many things to still get to. I got to ask now, is there anything else you want to talk about on the rodeo side of things before we go to the PBR side of things? I want to ask about that transition and how that came to be. I think in Fort Worth back in the winter, you told me a bit about how that happened, because I think it was a phone call from somebody somewhere.
Well, that was a little bit later, but I'll tell you. So when the PBR thing got to cooking,
because it would have got started when you were big time on the PRCA side of things.
Yeah, 93.
Yeah, sorry. And the first meeting was here.
Yeah.
You drove by the hotel that they had it at on the way over today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that was the first
that DoubleTree.
That was one of a couple meetings that was going on, and I was telling the story a couple days ago. I did a bull riding in Phoenix in the winter of '92, I think. And there was a lot of chatter and talk about, man, they just had a big meeting. All these bull riders are getting together, and they're going to do this and this. And I don't even remember. I don't think it was a BRO, because I did announce some bull rider only events.
That predated the PBR.
Predated the PBR.
When was the first BRO?
I don't know. It was in that
early '90s.
It was in the late '80s, early '90s.
But the first bull riding only event truly was the George Paul. Is that correct?
That was the first standalone event. It wasn't a BRO sanctioned.
It was nothing. No,
it was just a standalone. They started it from scratch, and it became the biggest and best standalone event on the planet.
And Donnie Joe, who you were with last night, you probably noticed his buckle he was wearing.
Yep, he's been there, done that. Del Rio's a big deal. Yeah. I got to announce Del Rio way, way, way later than that. It was a PBR event when I did it. But so in 1993, things started really percolating, and Tough Hedeman hosted an event, which was the Tough Hedeman Championship Challenge, and it was inside the Cowtown Coliseum in the Stockyards in Fort Worth.
Yeah,
I was announcing. This is 4 or 5 years in. And somehow, some way, I was asked to come and do some arena work, sideline reporter work type stuff. And it was actually with Rodeo Videos Incorporated.
The Flakes.
With the Flake brothers.
It's Reed and...
Reed and his brother.
I thought it was a dad for some reason.
A dad, and there was a brother, too.
Oh, okay.
There was a brother.
I forget what his dad's name is right now.
Yeah, I can't remember his brother. I remember Reed. So I was actually doing some on-camera interviews and stuff on the floor in 1993.
At Cowtown Coliseum.
At Cowtown. This would have been kind of a launch of the PBR, because their first real official season really wasn't official and real until '94, and they had their first PBR finals in Las Vegas at the MGM.
Adriano wins it.
Yep. So I did a couple of what later became Bud Light Cups in '93, and then '94 I did 3 or 4. I can remember one of them, Rancho Murrieta, California, and I saw for the first time what became. The little brindle bull ball face of Alex Nacarata's. Oh my goodness,
It's not ugly, is it?
No, that would have been Don
10
Kish.
years later, right?
That'd have been Don Kish.
But you're not talking about
Yeah, no, that's not him either. So anyway, cool event. Rancho Murrieta, California was one of them. So I did a couple, 3 or 4, what then became Bud Light Cup events that year. And I got to tell you another funny story. 30 days before the PBR World Finals, the PBR World Finals is not even on my radar. I'd been doing some big PRCA rodeos, had a circuit finals, was really concentrating mostly on rodeo, and I get a call from Tough Hedeman. And Tuff says, "Hey, Jerome Robinson has not called you, has he?" I said, "No, he hasn't." He said, "Well, he was supposed to call you. And, we need to have you at our PBR World Finals. Congratulations, you've been selected to announce the World Finals in Vegas." And I said, "Tell me those dates again." He said, "Oh, Lord." I said, "Well, I'm announcing the PRCA Rodeo in Seguin, Texas that weekend, so I can't go." He said, "Well, Randy, do you realize how big a deal this is going to be?" I said, "Well, sure I do, Tuff, but I have a commitment." And so Donnie Gay, believe it or not, was a stock contractor, All-Star Rodeo for 10 years, and he was producing PRCA Rodeos.
And was that Seguin?
Yep, and he was the stock contractor. I was Don Gay's announcer. I knew what the answer was going to be. I called Don anyway upon Tuff's encouragement and said, "Hey, I got a chance to go to Las Vegas." He said, "Well, you and I can't be in Las Vegas at the same time. I need you to be in Seguin because I'm going to Las Vegas." And I understood.
Yeah.
And
yeah, because he was doing the TNT broadcast
absolutely.
at the time, likely.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I knew, I understood, and I had a commitment. And so I told Tuff, I said, "Man, sorry, I can't go."
Yeah.
And because of that, I never got an invite for about 4 more years.
Yeah. Who did it instead?
I think early on, the first years, I think Justin McKee was introduced pretty quickly, and Mike Mathis was in that group then too.
Oh, really?
And so I continued to do a few more PBRs, and as my dates would change, I started adding more, and I started adding more. And
did you tell me, you don't have to say this or not, but did you prefer going to those with what they were doing with the production side of things, or was it the excitement? Or?
I'll answer that question for you.
Yeah.
If I had to choose today what I would rather do, announce a PRCA Rodeo or a PBR, my first would be PRCA Rodeo, only because I like all 7 events.
Okay.
I like the variety of presenting a different complexion in all 7 events.
Okay.
But while I'm at a PBR, I loved the atmosphere, the complexion, the production, the pyro, the music, the setting, the whatever.
Yeah.
So I'd say I liked them equally. And that's probably maybe a little unusual, but really I enjoyed the hype. I was in the early years of the big growth and the big players, the Tuffs, the Cody Lamberts, the Clint Brongers, the Jim Sharps, the Adriano Moraises. Man, I was in the golden era of the PBR. So I liked them equally, but if you told me I had to pick one, I'd go Pro Rodeo because that was where I was.
Okay.
It was my go-to. I just liked Pro Rodeo. I like bronc riding. I like barrel racing. I just liked it. So.
But you spent 14, 15 seasons on the PBR side of things?
Yeah.
Were you still announcing a ton of rodeos at the same time, or did you become almost exclusively PBR?
No, it was almost 50-50.
Okay, so you didn't have any weekends off. You were going every weekend.
No, and the great thing about the PBR too was it filled in the winter months because they were the heaviest scheduled.
Okay.
And as a rodeo venue changed a date or made a decision not to use me, I would fill that with another PBR event. And I was actually exclusive. I was fortunate, and I say this humbly, that I was fortunate to be only doing the televised events. I never did the touring pros. I never worked
almost exclusively on the cups
for no reason, just scheduling. And so I think, again, I'm going to foul the date up, but I think my first invitation was 1999, and I got to go to the PBR World Finals. And
that'd have been Thomas and Mack by then.
It was in Thomas and Mack by then.
98 was the last one at Caesars or MGM or something.
Yep. Yeah. And so I was in that era when it was at Thomas and Mack, and it was a phenomenal event. And then a few years later, they doubled the weekends, remember? And we had one weekend at Mandalay Bay.
Yeah.
Was there during that time. And so I just love that town. And then I was a bull rider.
Yeah.
And so then I say to my wife, "Hey, how about we start raising bucking bulls?" And she said, "Well, if we're going to do that," we started a small program. And we actually, there's a little tidbit side note, we bought some Kish heifers from the sale at the NFR. And then we turned around and we had a few of our own bulls already that we had been raising. And an accident-matched 2-year-old bull jumps the fence and breeds one of these Kish heifers. She has a calf. I sell the cow-calf as a pair to a breeder in, of all places, Iowa. That bull calf ends up circling back and becoming a part of the D&H program. His name was Big Deal. and he was the first ever ABBI, PBR, ABBI World Champion bull.
In like 2001 or 2 or
Yep.
3 or something?
Yeah, it would have been 1 or 2 in there. And so my wife and I, actually bred the first ever PBR, ABBI World Champion bull. Big deal. So
well, and what was your involvement on the ABBI side of things? There was something, I'm forgetting what it is now, but there was something that you helped create or did create, or I don't know what the story is there.
Well, Bob Tallman had started the Rodeo
yes.
Stock Registry, and everybody said Bob was nuts. Looking back now, and even early on, I was skeptical, but at the same time, all these stories about, man, I got these cows and they're all daughters of Bodacious, and I bred them all to Wolfman, and all these calves standing around here are Wolfman Bodacious cross cows.
Yeah.
And none of it was verifiable.
None of it was true. It was all
None
bullshit.
of it. Most of it was
made up.
Yeah, made up. So, but Tallman's idea was straight on. Getting everybody to follow along was a different story, but I knew Bob. We were colleagues and we were friends, and I can tell you that my wife Amber and I were the 26th member of the Rodeo Stock Registry that later became the ABBI when it was sold to the PBR.
Oh, wow.
So we were engaged in the breeding industry early. And then, obviously, later it was sold to the PBR. I thought about buying a share at the time. They were $25,000. I didn't have $25,000, and we didn't buy a share, so we weren't shareholders. But then we became breeders. We became producers of the biggest ABBI event ever in Stephenville, Texas, called the Spring Spectacular. We bucked 300-plus bulls in 2 days, had a big steak feed and a sale and everything else. So early on, we were involved on the breeding side, and then by virtue of that, we raised some bulls that ultimately went to the PBR Finals. I actually had a bull at the PBR Finals that we still owned. I was announcing, suit and tie, and put my microphone down, and the other announcer continued the show, and I went and flanked a bull. We called him Red Chester, and I bucked off Adriano Moraes that year. So,
oh, wow.
And Adriano's a friend. I wasn't proud of him bucking off. I would have rather seen him be 95. But, yeah, I got to flank a bull and announce the bull riding, too.
So, geez, there's so many moments in there. But I had a piece wrote down here that I really wanted to get to about some of the most memorable moments that you've had on the microphone. Because they're between, like there's, what is there here? 38 years of announcing. Is that correct right now? Mm-hmm. So there's so many different pieces, but tell me about some of the most memorable pieces for you.
I've not really ever thought about that.
May I think about some stuff and shoot it at you?
Sure.
So I'm thinking like I don't know if you would have been there, Gaffney in Nampa when he was 96 3/4 on Little Yellow Jacket.
Little Yellow Jacket. I saw Little.
You probably saw all 3 of the 96 point rides.
I saw Little Yellow Jacket ridden at Nampa 2 different times. One by Gaffney and the other one by
wasn't it Ian McKay?
Cody.
That was Vernal, Utah. Sorry.
Oh man, Amber, my roommate.
Wasn't it Cody Newberry?
No.
Jody Newberry. My bad.
No, the other one, Corey McSpadden. Here I am.
Corey
having
McFadden.
A break.
Yeah.
Corey McFadden rode him 1 year at Nampa, and then Gaffney did too. I'm going to say this. I'm going to
wasn't
try
the best ride. No offense to Gaffney. He'd probably say the same thing. I think he did say it on our show that he was I got loaded a bit.
Okay, so I'll answer that question this way. I roomed with on the PBR trail. I roomed with Corey McFadden and Greg Potter. So they became close friends. Yeah. And, of course, Michael Gaffney. I will say the prettier ride was Michael Gaffney. Yeah. The grittier ride was Corey McFadden. But I'm going to do a little disclaimer here. You're going to ask me some questions I may not remember because so many of these things that happened that were big-time deals, they just are, I was a part of so many little things that sometimes it's hard to remember the details, but I will share this. I was in the announcer stand at Colorado Springs when Chris Shivers got on ugly for $1 million and bucked him off. And
like 1.7 seconds?
Yeah. And you want to go back to the breeding days when I bought all them cows from Don Kish? We DNA'd all of them, and we crossed them back to see if they were the mothers, the dams, to any of the bulls that Don was raising or using. And Don let me bleed all those superstar bulls. We probably bled 20 bulls. We paid for the DNA, and put him in his name in the registry, but we had the mother to Ugly.
No shit.
And we flushed her, and we got a few calves out of her. And we had the mother to Ugly. We had the mother to Real Deal. We had the mother
Holy
to
shit.
Copenhagen Cash.
Holy
we had
shit.
the mother to Ray Charles. We had the Grandam to Copenhagen Cash. And we also were instrumental in DNAing a passed away Mr. T. Mr. T had died, and we took a piece of bone from his skull that was recovered at the Kish Ranch and DNA'd Mr. T. We did that. My wife and I did that.
No way.
And we verified that the bull we were breeding, Winchester, was a DNA verified son of Mr. T. He went to the NFR. Winchester did so. And I'll give you another little wrinkle here. Mr. T's skull, he was buried in California. The grave was washed up by a big, huge rainstorm, and that skull ended up being returned to Pete and Hal Burns, and ultimately he was inducted into the Cheyenne Hall of Fame, Cheyenne Frontier Days. Mr. T was, and Mr. T's skull is in Cheyenne in the Hall of Fame there.
Holy.
By virtue of we found it, and we were kind of instrumental in getting that done. So,
I might be mixed up here, but Mr. T wasn't the bull that killed Lane.
nope, that was taking care of business.
Taking care. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I had taken care of business in my head, but I was.
You want another
Mixed up.
interesting stat? The
Yes.
day he was killed was the first time Mr. T was ever ridden 2 bull rides later by Marty Stannard.
Nobody remembers that part. Huh.
Nope.
I knew there was a connection there with Mr. T, but I forgot
Yeah.
forgot what it was.
Marty Stannard was 94 points on him to set an arena record at Cheyenne the day that Lane was killed.
2 rides after.
And I was going through a stoplight in Tenaha, Texas on the morning after on Monday, listening to the radio, and Paul Harvey actually announced that Lane had been killed the day before.
Wow.
Yeah, I know exactly where I was.
Wow.
Want to hear another story?
Yeah.
I wrote a song about Lane.
Yeah, I had that somewhere in the notes too.
Wow. He when he passed away that fall, he was actually in that group with Tuff and Jim and Clint Bronger, and I was announcing it was an open bull riding. It was a big sanctioned bull riding in Belton, Texas. I was there by myself, and I had my guitar, and I was in a hotel room. I just went across the street and bought me a hamburger at McDonald's, and I sat down and started piddling around, and I thought, man, I was looking at the roster of the bull riders, and I thought Lane wasn't on it, and man, I thought, man, that's crazy. Gosh dang it, how come that? And I sat down and I penned a song, A Smile Like That is what it was called, and it was a song about Lane's personality, not about his bull riding, and I wrote it on a McDonald's bag.
Paper bag.
Yeah. I wished I had that paper bag back so bad. But anyway, I never performed the song, never really did anything with it. And we were at a rodeo somewhere that spring, and I was piddling around. But a bunch of buddies of mine, man, I got to play you this song. And I played it, and they were like, what? Oh, my gosh, you got to send that to Lane's mom and dad and this, that, and other. I can't remember who instigated all that, but I recorded it in a little custom recording studio in Nashville, and we ended up sending it to them. And they used it on the tail end when the credits were rolling on the tribute to Lane and the bull, the Challenge Champions when he was
Red Rock.
when he was riding Red Rock. They used it in the movie.
Oh, wow.
Anyway,
That's wild.
and I also had the good fortune of they did a big bronze for Lane at Cheyenne.
Yeah.
And Clyde and Elsie invited myself and Amber to the unveiling, and I performed that song live during that unveiling.
Holy. Jeez. So going back to the memories on the microphone.
Yep.
I threw a couple at you, but what
Yep.
are yours?
The PBR stuff, the world champions, the world championship races, the couple of times there where Justin McBride was the bridesmaid and then hangs off the side of Camo Cat and wins the world, and those close races like that, and being a part of the anniversaries and the milestones that the PBR made, and being a part of that just whole concept was a pretty cool deal. And
then the breakup with where Tuff goes away.
Yeah, that was a lot of inside information. A lot of folks will never know and don't need to know. And I didn't know most of it. But like sometimes relationships dissolve. But the big news there too was the introduction of Randy Bernard. He and I became we became friends and enemies. We would, and he'd love for me to say this. We would be back and forth on a couple of things, and I'd say, you ought to be doing this. No, we're not going to do that. And we never had any challenges, but we became closer friends than I thought we were. And that led to my being at the American later, but we'll talk about that later. But PBR moments, just a lot of those little things, you know. For me, on the microphone, gosh dang, every time you stuck another foot on another rung on the ladder, from the first time I got to go to the Badlands Circuit Finals, and then, oh gosh, here comes the Great Lakes Circuit Finals. Oh gosh, here comes the Pocatello. Oh my, here comes an alternates job. Oh my goodness, I'm going to get to write the scripts at the NFR. And I mean, it's just been a cool climb. And so I don't know that I could pick out anything in particular, but I got to see a lot of things. Madison Square Garden with the PBR.
Were you there for the first one?
Yes, sir. First one there. The next year, took my oldest son there, and we got to ride the subway and went to the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building and stuff like that. But I got to go a lot of places and do a lot of things that some snot-nosed kid from East Texas wasn't supposed to go do.
Oh, yeah.
So
I got to ask you about this. So I text Justin McKee this morning, and I said, what's your best or favorite Randy Schmutz story? And he said him and Brandon Bates put the boxing gloves on at a PBR one time.
No.
But he said, and I texted Bates too. I was like, hey, what do you got? And he said asking about the boxing thing. And Justin says, not sure you want to talk about that, but I gotta go there because it sounds like a wild time.
Well, that dadgum Cody Lambert, and he would be just tickled to death if I said this. Cody Lambert loved to instigate and create. And poke and prod and push and whatever so Brandon and I, although Justin McKee and I did a phenomenal job announcing together in the short time because he moved to television pretty quick.
And you guys would have worked together on the microphone early on with the PBR.
Justin?
Mid to late 90s?
Yes.
Is that right? 96 to 98?
And then Brandon Bates came along.
Yeah.
And Brandon and I think he would say the same thing, we thought we were the best PBR tandem in those days because I loved bucking bulls. I raised bucking bulls. I liked bucking bulls. And I loved the athletes that got on them. But he was more in tune with those younger kids that were coming along, and he was more contestant-driven, relationship-driven. And so he'd have stories about the Cowboys that I didn't know.
You talked the bulls.
And I talked about the bulls, and I talked about the contestants too. But it was like, to me, the best two in the last 20 years, when you get past Pat Summerall and John Madden, then you go to Joe Buck and Troy Aikman. We were the Joe Buck and Troy Aikman, I thought. And so Bates and I got along really, really well. And so I'm not remembering what instigated Lambert's thought that we should have a boxing match. It was I'm better than you, or you're better than me, or I'm a better announcer. Later, I'm going to tell you another Brandon Bates story about us getting on two bulls.
Yeah, that's in here too.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I heard about this one.
Yeah.
I heard you beat him though on that one.
Yeah. I'm going to call a draw on the boxing match, but
okay.
I rode the bull longer than he did.
Okay.
Anyway, so he came up with this goofy thing that we're going to have these two announcers in the locker room put on boxing gloves and have
pre
a
or post show.
Pre-show.
Seems like a bad idea.
It seems like a really bad idea. And
what year was this?
I have no idea. It would have been
late 90s or early 2000s?
It would have been late 90s, early 2000s.
Jeez.
And then he said that, and I don't even remember how this got interwoven into it. We're all going to bet on it, or everybody's going to pledge some dollars or something, and whoever wins gets to give it to their favorite charity or some BS. But I never remembered that part of it. But so this was nuts, and me and Bates really didn't want to go along with this deal.
Yeah, you were goaded into it by everybody
so
else.
we get over in the corner and said, now look, now we got to soft sell this deal. I don't need you to whip my butt, and I don't really want to whip yours.
Yeah.
So he said, okay, and so we get in there, and we're ting-tanging around there, and pretty soon he lays one on me.
Right in the chin or right in the nose?
I don't know where it landed, but it wasn't supposed to land there.
Not that hard.
And it wasn't supposed to be that hard, and so he lays one on me, and I'm thinking, what the heck? And I thought, well, okay. And so
Then you get mad.
We got mad, and we wrestled around there for, I think we only went one round. I don't even remember. They all called it a draw, but the bull riders were tickled. Lambert was laughing his butt off, and everybody ended up not killing anybody. So,
Oh, wow.
But it was a funny deal.
Oh, jeez.
So we were somewhere. I think we were at Jerome Davis's event together. It was a touring pro, and we were all back in the back afterwards, and we were having some liquid encouragement. And Bates said something about his bull riding career, and I called bullshit. I said, hell, you never got on any bucking bulls. You're not a bull rider. And I said, I was, and he wasn't, and this, that, and other. And J.W. Hart was standing there. And we were going to his event the next weekend in Oklahoma. He said, we can settle that next weekend. You guys come a day earlier. We're going to stay a day late, and we're going to get you guys on a couple of bulls and just see who's better than the other. And so it was just up there in southern Oklahoma, about 3 or 4 hours from the house. And so this is all going along all weekend. And I called Amber. I said, she's at home. I said, why don't you bring the kids and come up here? I'm going to get on a bull tomorrow. And I hadn't been on a bull in 6 or 8 years.
Because you're probably early 30s?
Yeah,
Yeah.
mid-30s. And so she comes up, and it's a backyard deal. It's at JW's house. And a bunch of them guys stuck around, Ross Coleman, Justin McBride, and them guys. I was using McBride's bull rope and Ross Coleman's chaps and somebody else's vest and whatever. And I can't remember who went first. And he run 2 2-year-old bulls in there. And I know damn well I wasn't going to let go. So I didn't let go. But about the second jump, I felt my right arm snap.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, what the
Riding
hell?
arm or free arm?
Riding arm.
Oh, shit.
And I thought, man, something ain't right here. But I went ahead and struggled to get a 6 or 7 second ride. I got off, and I looked at my right bicep, and the bicep was in the top of my arm. I ripped my bicep.
Oh, no.
And I walked over to Amber. I said, guess what? That'll be my last bull ride. And I rolled up my sleeve, shoulder the bicep. Anyway, Bates got on his, and I don't know what the differential was. It didn't matter. I rode mine longer, so we were even. So he might have whipped me in the boxing match, but I outrode him in the bull riding.
Oh, dear.
And about 3 days later, my dadgum arm turned purple, green, yellow bruise from my shoulder to my wrist.
Yeah.
It stopped at my wrist. It was really weird. And so I thought, well, I better call Tandy. I called Tandy. He said, get in here. And I went in there the next day, and he said, good grief, what'd you do? I told him. He said, well, he motioned, do you use your hand to, do you use a screwdriver for a living? I said, no. He said, we're not going to fix it. Good luck. See you. I said, what? Well, I didn't know that bicep was more to do this.
Oh, really?
And so if you'll watch your bicep, it's more to do that
Oh.
instead of a curl.
Oh.
And so he said, you'd spend more time, more money, and wasted motion on fixing it. Don't get on a bull again.
Yeah.
And so I didn't, and I've never looked back. So that's the
Oh,
Brandon
smokes.
Bates boxing and bull riding story.
Holy.
I'm tickled you dug that up.
I gotta say from Justin too. I don't think he'd mind me sharing this, but he said he is undoubtedly my favorite announcer to work with ever. He and I always were going in the same direction with the same philosophy. Neither of us were afraid to pass it back and forth. We had the same idea on how to tell the story. He also said you're a genius in rodeo production. I thought that was neat coming from Justin.
Well, one of the unique things about McKee, early on, I know there's a lot more tandems today in rodeo. When I say tandems, I mean two announcers.
2 announcers, yeah.
Early on, when I started in the PBR, it was McKee. I worked with Mike Mathis. These are at the big Bud Light Cups, and then later when they changed to the other sponsor, the Built Ford Tufts. McKee, Mathis, Charlie Throckmorton, Bates, right on down the line. And then Pocatello, Corley, Polhamus, John Shipley. I worked with Jim Thompson, one of my favorite guys in South Dakota at my first Badlands Circuit Finals. I worked tandem with a lot of people. And my philosophy was, you're first, I'm second. If I can step up and hit one out of the park and the timing's right, I will. But I never fought over mic time. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I was so much more comfortable, I think, than a lot of guys in that era. And the other thing is, just like the Bates deal, I knew what his strengths were. He knew what I wanted to talk about. And it was almost like a sixth sense about what we were going to do. And I can go along with a whole lot more. Andy Stewart, I worked with Tallman. I worked with Garrett Yerrigan. And I don't know. I will say this. Yes, I did have trouble with one announcer in my lifetime. I'll let you guess who it is, and we'll leave it at that.
I won't guess. I don't
So,
need to.
but the thing about it is,
I'll let the audience guess.
the thing the other philosophy that I had was, we were paid equally for the job we were doing on the microphone. So if you want to talk more than I do, and get paid the same, I don't care. And as it worked out, for the most part, all but one individual, we were just peachy keen.
Right on.
And so, but I enjoyed those days too, because man, it was half the work and twice the fun. So I enjoyed working with two announcers.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Okay, I got a couple more things. We can probably. I just want to get to like 2 or 3 more pieces here before we wrap it up. We could keep going for a long time here, Randy. We both got you got to get back on the road, and I got a couple things I still.
I'm
do
having a
today, too.
ball. So
yeah.
thanks
for taking the time.
You bet.
Is there anything else we want to talk about on the PBR side of things, as far as maybe do we want to talk about the departure and getting away from the rodeo side of things? Like I don't.
You mean me?
Yeah, like where you
So-
aren't there anymore. Like you
Yeah.
probably get replaced. Unfortunately.
Yeah,
or something
I can,
happens. I don't know.
You know, evolution in this game is a constant. If you're not evolving, you're not moving. And I can say this, that for me, I had fun up until the last day I worked a finals. But as things changed and ownership changed, the complexion changed, the atmosphere changed, and then the generation changed. We went from the toughs to the ties to the gyms to the younger guys. Chris was in that era, but as that changed,
and Coleman and those
so
guys are
those
all the
transitions, kind of became a little different look and a little different feel. And for me, generally, things became a little less fun at the time. And so I voluntarily kind of walked away after my last finals appearance, which I don't remember which year that was, 06, 07, somewhere in there. But
maybe 08 would it be the year
yeah.
Marchi won?
I think so. When
Yeah.
he finally, I was there when he got his buckle.
Yeah, so 08
So
then.
I think it was 08.
Yeah, because McBride won 07, so
Yeah.
he won 08, yeah.
And, since it's a podcast and you want to hear a little dirt,
I don't need to.
well,
I'm just curious on
this
the
is a
truth.
fun deal. The year before it was, so if my last year was
Marchi.
if my last year
Nunez
was
won 09.
Yep. So
Yeah.
if my last year was 08, let's just say it was 08. I don't remember if that's true or not, but
Yeah.
that spring at Albuquerque,
Ty's event.
Ty
Murray,
I'd
just
been
for
doing
those
it a long
Why
time.
not know?
And the great thing about the PBR production is it was structured. We had a production meeting.
It's a format.
Exactly. We had a
Same
production.
everywhere you go.
We had a
Just like
production meeting
McDonald's.
2 hours before the perf.
Yeah.
And we're all there, and it's the full. It's Flint's there. I'm there. Other announcers there. Music directors there. Lighting
was-
directors there.
Music was Mark? or was it
Mark.
Chuck?
Mark was there.
Stevenson,
Well, Chuck
yeah.
was there. Chuck Stevenson or
Yeah.
Chuck
Lopman.
Lopeman.
Yeah.
And then Mark Stevenson. They were both there in that era.
Yeah.
I worked mostly with them throughout that whole career. Gogi Grant was the first one way back in the day.
And he did Calgary, the
Exactly.
Stampede for a long time.
Yeah.
He was one of the first. He was one of the pioneers.
Yeah. So
Is he still around?
don't know. Don't know.
really?
Yeah, went off on his way and we never heard of him again. But
Oh wow. Okay.
so Albuquerque.
Yes.
Albuquerque is in the
Spring of
mountain.
08.
Yep. Albuquerque's in the mountain time zone.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an hour earlier. Back then we were still wearing watches and shit and not resetting our watches. My wife came with me that weekend. We spent the weekend together and we went to Albuquerque. In the afternoon of I think it was the second perf, we're in town doing some stuff or whatever. And I knew my production meeting was at XYZ time, 2 hours before the perf. But then again, I didn't factor in the mountain time. And then on top of that, that night's performance was going to be live and an hour earlier than normal.
Oh shit.
So I missed the production meeting.
2 hours before the show.
First time ever.
Yeah.
First time
Totally
ever.
missed it.
First time ever.
And
Simple.
this is spring of 08.
Spring of 08. Now
And
keep
Randy's
it,
still there?
Randy's there.
And
but-
he's pretty punctual
Yes,
on his
sir.
meetings
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
Similar to Sean Davis.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
And Clayton Cullen,
Yeah.
who went on to help do most of the production at the American,
Yeah.
he was my boss, and we're very close friends, no issues. And so he calls me on my cell phone, and I answer the phone. Where you at? I said, I'm on the way to the building. I mean, I'm only it's a 30, 45-minute differential here because of the time zone and my mistaken start time.
Yeah.
I said, I'm on the way to the building. Be there in a minute. Well, you're late. The meeting's over. How come you missed the meeting? I said, what? So we explained it and said, all right, see you when you get here. So I got there, got my production packet, my timeline and everything, and this, that, and other. And I mean, no issue. We'd been doing this for 10 years.
Yeah.
It wasn't as if what I did or missed wasn't going to affect my performance. And so, but at the next production meeting, the next morning, we had another performance before we left Albuquerque.
Yeah.
We get to the production meeting, and we're all done. And Clayton says, well, everybody hold up a minute. Got one more item of business. As you guys know, Randy missed the production meeting yesterday. And so he's been fined $500.
Oh.
And everybody in the room just went gasp and just big wide-eyed. And I'm like, what? Are you serious? And he hands me an envelope with my check in it.
Already
and
taking the $500
and it's $500 light.
Ooh.
And so I thought, what the heck? An announcer missing a meeting? And so I reached out on Monday morning and called Randy, and he didn't answer the phone. Then I sent Randy an email, and it was a nice email. It was, come on, bud, what the heck? I mean, gosh dang, $500. And
do you think that email may have been taken negatively?
Must have been.
Because it wasn't a conversation
must
in
have
person?
been. And I got to go back one step. Actually, that meeting and that envelope and that fine was disclosed to me the next weekend after Albuquerque
After the fact.
at Nampa. We were at Nampa at our next event. So anyway, I called Randy, didn't answer the phone, sent an email, and didn't answer the email. Later that day, next day, sometime within 24 hours, my boss, Clayton Cullen, calls me and says, hey, Bernard, got your email. Bad news, sorry to tell you, your services are no longer needed with the PBR.
And that was like the week after?
Mm-hmm.
Holy smokes.
Yeah. So I said, what? He said, well, they've decided to terminate their relationship with you. And I said, oh, come on, Clayton, what the hell? Are you kidding? He said, not my call. Sorry, I'm just the messenger. Click, and I tried to reach out to Bernard. He never would talk to me. And so that was early spring, but I had like 7 or 8 contracted events.
And maybe the finals?
And maybe the finals.
Oh, geez.
And so I left it at that. But I did ask the what, the why, and the how. And I don't remember if it was Clayton. I think it was Clayton. We had a contract. They had a real stiff 3-4 page contract. And Clayton, somebody, I don't think it was Clayton, somebody said, read the first paragraph. I said, okay, read it again. And I can't remember the exact language. I do too. In consideration of the events listed in attachment A, we will pay you XYZ for 1 purse, 2 purse, and or 3 purse. And I said, so this is a contract to do those events, the attachments there's the 15 events, and no, sir, it's in consideration of. It's not a commitment to, it's in consideration of.
Oh, geez.
So they were able to terminate my relationship, and so I went on about my business.
So wait, you didn't do any more of the events? It was over?
Well, I got one more chapter.
Okay.
So I did my summer rodeo schedule, and I think it was Jerome Robinson that called me. And he said, hey, or maybe it was Clayton, I don't remember, but he said, hey, are you available for Columbus, Ohio, and Uncasville, Connecticut? Those were the last 2 events before the finals. I said, to announce? He said, yep. I said, yes, sir. Never question, never, yes, sir. And he said, and if you'll, not if, it wasn't an if, but and the PBR finals this year. And so I chuckled and I said, so I'm going to get to come back and do Columbus and Uncasville in the finals. And they said, yep. And they said, okay, perfect. See you in Columbus. So I did.
After Clayton fired you?
After I was fired. And so I did. And then we got the 2 events done. We all show up in Las Vegas. And they always had a third announcer. There was 3 of us.
2 during the regular season, 3 at the finals?
3 at the finals.
The third guy does the presentations and
on
a
the
few
floor.
of those pieces. Yeah.
And in case one of us, has an issue, he steps in. So I don't remember who the third was the prior years or whatever, but we showed up there at the.
It's probably Clint.
It was Clint was there this year
As the third guy.
Yeah.
For the first time, probably.
Yeah, but we showed up at the finals and our first production meeting, which was a day before we were to start. We had a pre kind of meeting.
Yeah.
And we're all in this big room. And they pass out these ring binders and all of our production schedules and everything else. And Clayton leans back and says, Bates, you and Clint are in the booth. Randy, you're on the floor.
Which, like, no offense to anybody, but the floor guy is usually the rookie.
Yeah, it was a demotion.
Respectfully.
Yeah, it was being demoted.
Yeah.
And so
on the day before, and they didn't tell you till you got there.
no.
Oh, boy.
So I
kick in the guts.
yeah. So I kind of took a breath and I said, Clayton, am I understanding that I'm going to be doing presentations and interviews? He said, yep. I said, okay. And I closed my notebook and got up and was leaving the room. Where are you going? I don't need to be here. I'm going to the hotel. Come back, Schmutz. Don't be that way. I said, Clayton, come on, good grief. I don't need to be here. I'll see you tomorrow night. Sit down. So I sat down and went through all the motions or whatever. And I was just like, all weekend, I'm like, come on, what the hell? Jeez. I never opened my mouth, never said a word. I said in that meeting, I said, first question, do I still get a buckle? Yep. I still get my jacket? Yep. Check still the same? Yep. Okay, I'll sit down. So I sat down, and I just thought to myself all week, I was like, good grief. This is how we're going to do this?
Yeah.
So anyway, I just happened to get on an elevator after the last perf with Lambert. And I said, Cody, I said, congratulations, you win. I'm done. And so, you don't have to do that, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, I'm good. I'm going to go home and do what I want to do. And so, but what's ironic about that, a few years later, Lambert was quoted as telling somebody, didn't tell me, but quoted as telling somebody I was one of the best to ever pick up a microphone.
Oh, wow. Huh. Respect. Yeah. But you missed those shows. They were a big part of your life for a long time.
Well, it was, and those guys carried on and they did their thing, but I don't regret one damn minute.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was and what's crazy is that Lambert and I talk now and like we're old buds, and it's fine,
Yeah.
and there's no animosity. It's like I said earlier, evolve. You're going to evolve, and so, and I chose to do the quitting, but it was one of them deals where I'll say this. That was the only thread through the fabric of the PBR, and it permeated into the stock contracting and some of the other contract personnel. And for good reason. The reason the PBR thrived was because they put their bull riders first. Yeah. Okay? And I'm tickled to death with every one of them, all the success, everything. No animosity, no second thoughts, but we were expendable. I mean, we were expendable.
We still are.
Yeah, we were expendable.
We're replaceable, too.
And so, but then again, too, fast forward, I departed from that, and then we were still raising bucking bulls because we quit in 2010.
Yep.
But the ABBI thing was really kicking in, and we were doing a lot of other things, and we had a lot of things to fill the gaps.
And the production side of things.
Yeah, and then
Looks West Productions.
Yeah, Looks West Productions was Amber and I. We were doing a lot of those PBR ABBI events.
Yeah.
And then I had a pause in that announcing thing, and then Jade Artery from the ABBI called me a few years ago and said, "Hey, we want you to come back. Can you come back and do our ABBI futurities and the finals for the ABBI?" Because I was a pedigree guy. I loved pedigrees, and I could read. I could read a bull pedigree, and so I went out and did that, and I've been doing that. I'm going again this year. So what comes around goes around. The train comes back somehow, some way if you can get on it. So no issue there. But I share that only to say that we're all human and we all make decisions, and so that goes with the back and the forth with Randy and I. Mm-hmm. And we never discussed that anymore. But I forgave him after he called me to do the American.
Because that was a game changer of a show when it came on. And
big time.
2014 Richmond champion wins $1.1 million. And it blows everything out of the water. Yes. Like it just was such an unreal event.
So we'll go back to your question earlier. What's the biggest, what's the highlight that stands out? A phone call from Randy.
Yeah.
And never got to do the NFR. I kind of lost count. I think.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Well, yeah, I lost count. I think that on that sheet over there somewhere, I think there was about 11 different finals events. I did 52 times or something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah, 52 different times to work 11 different finals.
Yeah, except for the NFR. But I call the NFR one of them because I was the alternate and I did do the openings. But from 95 through till the end, through till now, I would have loved to have had a chance to stand on that podium on the fence of the Thomas and Mack and do the NFR because it was my love and my life. But when Randy called, that was as far from my thinking I'd get to go do that because it was a big, huge event, and I'd been out of the mainstream for a couple of years and doing my thing at home and whatever. So, but I'll say this, Randy band-aided that too because the American is the NFR on steroids. You can say, oh, guess what? The top 10 who just were there in December came to compete against the best unknowns you've ever not seen. And it was an unbelievably produced, phenomenal event. And for 9 years, I got to do it, and it was my NFR.
And it's in front of more people per night, like for one show, whatever. Like it was
absolutely.
I don't know, 46,000 people there the one time with the PBR.
And the storylines, and the $1 million bonus, and the races throughout the day, and I could go on and on. So
and the qualifiers.
So I guess if you really said, okay, what's the pinnacle? What's the mountaintop? The mountaintop for me was the American. Yeah.
Okay, a couple more things. We got to talk about Silver Creek, how that came to be, and where you're at now. There's a few rodeos. What do we got? 4, 7, 8, probably 9 shows, 8 or 9 shows you guys put on your own.
Yeah.
And then subcontract to another half dozen.
Yeah.
And then stock going to the NFR.
Yeah.
That's a big deal now. So let's touch on that before we're done. We got to talk about Flirty as well, the Palomino.
Yeah.
But before, one more thing on the PBR. Terry Don West, today is September 11th. Terry Don West misses an event, doesn't get to go.
Yeah.
What's the story there? I don't remember and I don't know the whole thing, but he gets kind of banned and leaves the PBR for
I
it.
can hit the highlights. I remember that week when 9/11 hit. The next event was Laughlin, Nevada, outdoors. Great event. Been there several times.
Under the lights.
Under the lights. Yeah, they had lights there, and it was nighttime. Thank God it's too hot in the daytime.
April probably too, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, this was September.
Okay.
No, this was the Laughlin was the weekend after 9/11 happened. 9/11 was middle week.
Yeah, like a Tuesday. I think.
And so we're all wondering the what, the why, and the how we're going to get there because even airline, traffic,
many flights.
travel was not really back up and running complete. And I don't remember. We'd have to go back.
It's a 24-hour drive to Vegas from Texas.
Yeah, and
where
so
you're living, probably.
So one of the production crew called me and said, "Are you coming to Laughlin?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I want to try. We're going to get there." And I actually ended up getting on a plane because air travel, got
kind of resumed by
rebooted.
Friday.
Yeah, rebooted. But everybody was wondering the what, the why, and the how, and the if we could go.
And probably scared people. They probably did not
Correct.
want to fly.
Exactly. And so one of them was Terry Don.
Didn't want to fly.
Yeah. He didn't want to come. And
from Texas to likely
Oklahoma.
Yeah. Jeez.
So
which just had I guess it was a long time before.
But the key here was if you were on the Bud Light tour or the Built Ford Tough tour at the time,
you had to go.
You had to go. If you were in the top 45, it was required that you be at those events unless you were hurt or injured or had a family catastrophe or issue or otherwise. And so I don't know who, I don't know when, I don't know how, but somehow, some way, Terry Don, in a conversation with a higher up, understood that his not wanting to get on a plane and not wanting to come would be accepted and he would be exempt. But then it turned out that he wasn't. And they used the rule and expelled him. And I've got my thoughts on why. I'll leave that to myself. But at the end of the day, they took the opportunity away from one of the most talented ever who could have gone on to do some bigger, better things under the PBR banner, but didn't get a chance to do it.
And was a PRCA world champion. And
yep.
It was
prior
before
to that,
Blue Stone, right?
Yeah,
was it 2000,
99?
Right
in there, 99.
99.
Yeah. But that was a tough deal, and it's talked about, and it's argued about, and it's discussed, and Terry Don will tell you the whole story, and I've heard it, but it's just to me, that was a little bit of a dark stain on the PBR too.
Well, and then the tough thing was that happened a couple years later in 2003, is that right?
When he was expelled?
Well, when Tough kind of ended up leaving,
well, then he split and took off and everything else. I don't know the details on all that, what happened there, but the Terry Don deal, common sense says, given what happened that week, if you didn't want to get on a plane and you didn't want to fly to the western part of the country, you should have been exempt from the rule that you had to be there.
Yeah.
But that's my opinion.
Okay.
And it's worth about what that cup of coffee cost right there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay. Silver Creek then.
Silver
Let's
Creek.
do that. We got to talk about Flirty from your buck and horse string.
sure.
And a couple more things, and I got to ask you your definition of cowboy shit.
Okay.
Just so you know that's coming. That's one of our final
Okay.
questions.
So we had piddled around, thought about, discussed, cussed, and otherwise either didn't want to or wanted to be a stock contractor. I'll say it. She'll laugh. My wife said no, 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 and double HEL, however you spell it, no. And so I ended up kind of making a deal with Matt Williams, the current owner of Silver Creek Rodeo Company. He had started Silver Creek Rodeo Company in 2013.
Okay.
He purchased an existing card that was the original Western Trails card that Jerome Robinson had for all those years.
Really? Ken,
So-
wasn't Shane Gunderson in on the Silver
Yep.
Creek thing
Yeah,
for a while?
Shane was involved with
Glenville?
it. A couple of other guys were involved with it with Matt. And so fast forward to 2018, and I kind of wanted to do this, and we were not announcing as much, and she wasn't music directing as much, and we had our plate full, but just not with rodeo. And so she gave in, she indulged, and we purchased Silver Creek in 2018 in the fall September. Upon purchasing it, we had almost 20 animals selected to go to the PRCA Circuit Finals that fall, and then we began operations of that in 2019. And we stripped a few of the amateur rodeos off the schedule, continued to do some amateur rodeos and the pro rodeos that were on the schedule. And then we added a few as we went along. And we took a little smaller company and we've taken it kind of to some different spots. And
Yep.
fast forward to 2022, we were selected to be the stock contractor primary at Livingston, Montana. It's one of the largest in the country, top 60 in the world. It's on the PRCA tour schedule and adds $17,000 an event. We have 700 contestants there, and we've been the producer there for the last 3 years.
Right on.
So the good news is we kind of did a few things and add a little inventory here and there, but we found it in a big hurry. Our checkbook wasn't big enough to do the things that we'd like to do. And so last fall in 2023, I sold the company to a man named Josh Walling, who we've now become close friends with. We argued over trying to stay in. I wanted to retain some ownership. I wanted to be a part of it because my desire to be a stock contractor. Let me back up. My desire to be a rodeo producer with livestock had not waned, had not weakened, and I still wanted to be involved. We tussled back and forth, and he finally said, I'm going to hire you and pay you a salary to be general manager only if your wife is still involved with this deal. And so we made a deal to be general manager, and not one thing has changed for me other than the physical. I don't have to drive a truck. I don't have to feed stock. I don't have to sort. I don't have to do all that. Amber and I manage all the production from start to finish, a lot of the logistics and everything else. And so Josh Walling is 100% the owner. But we have gotten along tremendously in 2024. He added a rodeo to the roster in Dover, Ohio, which was outstanding. He went for the first time to some Cinch World's toughest events and subcontracted there. He's got a tremendous bull herd that he brought along. Our horse herd was intact. He's added another 18 to 20 new bucking horses. And
top end expensive
yes, sir.
ones probably.
Yes, sir. It's been outstanding. And I'll be honest with you, the two of us together are stronger than he can be by himself or I was alone.
Yeah.
And he knows it, and I know it, and so far so good. We've nominated 7 bulls to the NFR and 1 horse, and with expectations of getting a few animals selected this year, and we're looking forward to that. So.
And I'm sorry that I don't know this, but I'm assuming you've had stock to the NFR previously.
Yeah, we were lucky. Matt did a really good job and had a bull R2 almost every year from 2013 through 2018. When we bought the company, we've taken at least 1 to 4 bulls every year except for one, 2020.
Yeah.
And we've had a couple of pretty cool deals. And, there's another thing, too. Think about this for a second. So PBR Finals, announcer, raising bulls, flanked one that I raised at the PBR Finals. Fast forward to the NFR, alternate announcer, wrote the scripts at 20 performances. And then I got to stand on the back of those yellow bucking chutes and flank a bull. Mm-hmm. And so it's still, I got to pinch myself to say, what? I really?
Yeah.
No, I did? No.
Yeah.
No,
That doesn't
I didn't
seem
do
right.
that. This is a
Yeah.
movie.
Yeah.
So
It's not real life.
it's been cool. And so fast forward and insert a little something here on the stock contracting. I've been a fan of bucking horses my whole life. I was a bull rider, but I just loved bucking horses, just crazy.
Yeah.
And so we purchased a stud while we were owners of Silver Creek from Three Hills Rodeo Company.
The Moorheads, right?
The Moorhead family. Dave and Marla Moore had been friends for 30 years. We purchased a stud along the way, unexpectedly, by the way. This horse came about kind of by surprise, and his name is Peach Fuzz, J11 Peach Fuzz. I'll tell you more about him in a second. But so it kind of started our breeding program. So we had our first colts in 2022. And so Peach Fuzz is sired by a horse called Harry that Dave bought from Harry Vold. And Harry is sired by Little Baldy, a Canadian bucking horse. And Harry's out of a mare called Lacey Dalton, which is an own daughter of Custer. So we've got Custer, one of the greatest
wow.
sires on the planet,
Yeah.
plus Little Baldy, who went on to have other great siblings and other progeny at the NFR. So my stud is sired by Harry. The most interesting part of that is he is out of a Kessler mare.
Huh.
And the Kessler family we know is a great legendary
Yeah.
breeding program. And this filly...
And their stuff's mostly with legends now.
Correct.
Is that, yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this filly, the mother to my stud, our stud, was a Kessler mare that went on to foal 7 colts all in a row, year to year to year. So Dave Moore had bred her to Harry all but 1 year. She had 7 colts. J11 Peach Fuzz was the last of 7 colts. And all of J11's brothers and sisters, 6 of them out of this mare went to the NFR.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Jeez.
yeah, so we have a pretty prolific stud, and we've bred him now for 3. This will be our 4th season. But the most unique thing is we've got a little colt we call Flirty that was a 2-year-old this spring, and our first attempt, our first colt crop, we went to a little outstanding backyard colt bucking in Arkansas, hosted by Thomas Mitchell. And rewind back to 2021, in a pasture injury, she sustained really should have been a terminating injury.
Yeah.
She cut her left hip on something, we don't know what, that created a wound that was about 14 inches wide and about 6 inches tall and about 4 inches deep. And through the help of some others and some folks who guided and directed us on how to treat her, we mixed betadine and sugar and packed it in this wound about every other day and did hydrotherapy on her for about 3 months, and that wound completely closed. And she was the rankest horse at the colt bucking at Thomas Mitchell's house, won the event, and has been the talk of the town, and she's our little pride and joy. So
There's a hell of a video that we'll show here, too, for
Pretty cool.
those watching
Yeah.
on the show, or we'll make sure you can find it.
Yeah.
But what else do we need to get to here on the rodeo company side of things?
Big things happening. We've got a couple of other rodeos on the horizon. Livingston. Oh, I wanted to go back. So in the breeding deal, that's why we're in Canada. So Thomas Mitchell's been a friend of mine for 35 years, and he's raised some phenomenal horses. Bugsy, which is currently on the rodeo trail, is a product of Thomas Mitchell's breeding program. There's a horse branded 9C57 they call Jessica Rabbit from the 5-Star Company out in Florida. She's been up here in Montana, and she's been putting on a show. She's expected to go to the NFR this year. She came from Thomas Mitchell. Julia, Bridal Shower, Sioux City Sue. I could go, there's a few more, but Thomas has done a tremendous job. He mentioned a couple years ago, man, those Calgary Stampede horses, that's the darndest thing you ever seen. And they're so good. He said, man, wouldn't it be cool if you could go to the Stampede Ranch? And so I was able to facilitate that. And
thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, Tyler Kraft
yeah.
and Keith Merrington. And I tell you what's so crazy. And then I told Thomas, I said, can you get away from Arkansas the middle of September and fly to Canada? And he said, what? I said, yeah, we got us a trip planned. And so they flew into Calgary a few days ago, and we picked them up and drove out to the Stampede Ranch and spent 2 days there, spent 2 days in Big Valley, went down to Tabor, and here we are back in Calgary, and we have been just absolutely entertained and educated about the best bucking horses on the planet, and they're all in Canada.
Yeah.
So,
well, and okay, I got to ask one quick question about that. I got 2 more things in. So the name Brenda Logan. So I don't know the whole story there, but the Logan family have a ton of, like, they're big breeders in the buck and horse side of things, but I don't really know the whole story there.
The Logan group, I'm not as familiar with.
Okay, fair. Okay, we don't need to go there.
Yeah, but I'm not as familiar with. There's so many, it's just like the bucking bull industry too. There's so many unknown breeders who have created phenomenal superstars. And I'll be honest with you, as a guy who's a lover of genetics and pedigrees, man, I wish more people would give credit to where they actually came from. If you didn't raise them, tell somebody who did.
Yeah.
Tell somebody who raised them.
Absolutely.
And that's becoming a little bit more mainstay. And I'll tell you, the DNA verification, there's a lot of cool things going on right now in the buck and horse world, and I think you're going to see some things. They've actually gone back and retrieved DNA from Custer. Mm-hmm. We have some DNA verified Custer studs.
Oh, wow.
So now we have DNA grandsons and granddaughters of Custer.
Yeah.
And then probably the biggest thing we haven't talked about is the embryo work, the flushing and the
clone
and the cloning. I'll share this. Thomas Mitchell has a direct son of the Bobby Joe skull clone. They call him Shrek. He's owned by the Veniclausen family down at Canyon, Texas. So Thomas has an own son of Bobby Joe out of a producing mare that's the mother to Julia and Bridal Shower that both went to the NFR.
Oh, yeah.
This horse is 5 years old now, and he's been breeding him now for 3 years. His colts, we're going to buck him this fall. They're already seeing signs of unbelievably. But think about this for a second. Bobby Joe is a DNA verified son of Custer, who was a gelding his whole life. He won 3 halters, went to the NFR, bucking horse of the year, now cloned and intact and breedable and creating offspring. And Thomas's horse isn't the only one. There are several phenomenal offspring of a once gelded Bobby Joe, now stud, that are going to make an impact in this industry that's going to be unbelievable, and it's going to be cool to watch it and follow it.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yep.
Okay. Last question. What's your definition of cowboy shit?
By you or just the
your
words
definition.
cowboy shit? Or
what
the
it
podcast,
means to you.
thecowboyshit.com?
No, what it means to you.
Well, you know what? There's so many different layers of cowboy, from the rancher we never see to the guy who gathers cattle we never see to the cowboy that drives a truck and you guys call them cattle liners up here.
Cattle liners, yeah.
These big trucks and hauling cattle. And then you've got, the guys that train these great horses that you see in the reining ring or the roping arena or whatever. And these contestants, and I like the words cowboy shit together because I don't care what you're doing. Hell, racing trucks in a mud hole could be considered cowboy shit instead of redneck shit. But, I've been fortunate to watch a little bit of all the facets. I've been on a reining horse. I've been on a cutting horse. Didn't see either one of them very well. But cowboy shit, it's about being a cowboy. And you can define it 10 different ways. But my part of it, my rodeo world, it's rodeo cowboys. So, yeah.
Well, thanks for taking the time. Is there anything we missed that we need to get on the record before?
Yeah, a whole lot. We'll have to do 2 shows.
Yeah,
so.
we're gonna have to reconvene
I want to
another
say
time.
thanks for just letting us hang out and tell some stories. Hell, we brought up some stuff I hadn't thought about in 30 years. So
that's
this
fun.
was fun.
Yeah.
Really fun.
Thanks for doing this, Randy.
Thank you, guys.